Welcome to Canada Files. I'm Valerie Pringle. My guest today is Wab Kinew, the Premier of Manitoba and the first First Nations leader of a government in Canada. Wab is a former hip-hop artist, journalist, and author of the book, The Reason You Walk. As a young man, he was convicted for drunk driving and assault. When he was elected, he said, "I was given a second chance in life, and I like to think I've made good on that." Welcome, Wab.
Thanks for having me.
You've been called an avatar of change. What does it mean to you to be the first Anishinaabe Premier of Manitoba?
The positive response to our election in Manitoba has been a hugely pleasant surprise because we went through a very bruising campaign, if we can call it that. And in the midst of that, you put one foot in front of the other, you're trying to get through, and then to emerge on the other side and to see a lot of optimism in our province of Manitoba, and to see a lot of people across the rest of Canada looking at Manitoba as a place that did something positive, something that our country's proud of, has been very, very cool. So I think what the meaning is for me is that, our part of the prairies is doing something that our country's very happy with, and I'm glad to play a part in that.
Well, there was one line that I read that said this was Manitoba's true act of reconciliation.
Yeah, I think Murray Sinclair might have lent his thought to that line. I think it's part of reconciliation to have a government that is going to maybe push things forward in a more positive way. And I think that for all the commentary, for all the lines that people have shared, the thing that I always just try to remind myself and remind our team of is we weren't elected for that. We were elected because of healthcare.
Right.
We were elected for
making
affordability.
Making history is good, but you're there to run the place and improve the place.
Exactly. And so all these comments are certainly very humbling and very, very meaningful to hear. But I think it just fills our team, fills myself anyways, with a big sense of responsibility that, yeah, there's all this optimism. Now we got to deliver on it. Now we got to do something with that positive feeling people have.
Now, your dad was a chief. You were made a chief. Do you have any sense you were born for this?
Well, I think the thing that I would point to for people is that I grew up around First Nations politics. My dad was an elected leader, and my mom was a political staffer, a technical staff. And so when I was a little kid, I was growing up at the negotiating table, or growing up in the political milieu, if we could say that. And while the type of politics that I do is very different from that world, the lessons that my parents shared with me along the way about how to treat people with respect and how to try and work towards consensus, I think are things that I've taken very, very seriously.
What do you think in the world, in Canada, in Manitoba, has changed to enable your victory, your success?
Well, my dad wasn't allowed to vote when he was a young man in this country. Right? He was well into his adult life before he earned the right to vote. And, his son, one generation later, have been elected by my fellow Manitobans to lead our province, to be the head of our democracy for the next 4 years. And so I think that's very, very meaningful. And so what's changed is I'm no smarter, I'm no more hardworking, I'm no more talented than people of my father's generation were, but the road is open for somebody of my generation. And so that's what's changed. And if we live in an era now where Canadians from all walks of life have access to engage and to experience the, chance to live and make the most of our lives together with people from every background, then I think that means that we're all doing better. We're all better off to live in a Canada like that than where we have been at some points in the past.
Your dad's story is a remarkable one, not unique, but an amazing one. You document it in your book, The Reason You Walk. Was sent off at age 5 to a residential school, hideously abused, had a tough life, but came to such a place of peace and reconciliation himself.
Yeah, and reconciliation in the big sense of the word, the different visions of Canada being brought together, but also
Making peace with the Catholic Church?
making peace with the church, a spiritual reconciliation, but also reconciliation on the family level, within the generations of the family tree. And so part of the reason why I wanted to share his life story, at least through my lens of witnessing his life story, is I thought, here's a Canadian who's lived a remarkable life, whose trajectory went through a period of historic change, but also of spiritual fulfillment and advancement, and also of a personal reckoning in the most positive sense of the word. And I just feel like as we talk about reconciliation in this historic moment in Canada, I think we almost do a disservice if we see it exclusively as an Indigenous issue. Because in peering through the prism of reconciliation, we have access to a view of some very universal life lessons. How do you make someone whole after they've been broken? How do you bring back together two competing forces that are perhaps at odds? How do you find a path forward when folks are not always in agreement? And I think these are some of the universal lessons that all of us grapple with in life, and it just so happens that the contours of my father's experience going to residential school and trying to chart forward a traditional path in the contemporary world, trying to be a good dad, husband, grandparent, that's what helped to deliver those life lessons for him, and I think our generation does well to study them.
Talk about being really angry as a teenager, young man. Where did that anger come from?
I think it's just a learned behavior, you know, when you're growing up and you see that that's the way to engage with the world, it's hard not to mimic it. And I think one of the things, you know, one of the reasons why I wrote the book was to ask the question, where did that learned behavior come from? Basically, I think that there were a lot of learned behaviors that were picked up by Indigenous people in residential schools and other government institutions of the day. And so when you become armed with that sort of historic knowledge, the question becomes, do you want to be someone who is part of carrying on that legacy of learned behaviors from past mistakes, or do we want to be part of the generation that makes an intentional choice, a conscious decision to stop that and to move forward in a better way?
Because it was in your case, you know, you ended up in trouble. You ended up convicted of things, and you say, having to find yourself at age 22, having to live back with your mom and dad who were essentially supervising you.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Yeah. Well,
but what turned you around?
It was having good parents, good community, and the spiritual support of the broader Sundance community in our case. And I had a mix of tough love, in some cases from my mom, effectively telling me, you were raised better than this, and not so many words.
What a good line. You're not the son I raised.
Yeah.
That wounded you.
Yeah. Well, it woke me up more than anything. So yeah, it was a mix of tough love and then having the support to then mold me into something better. And long story short, I'm a big believer in second chances. But I know that people don't make good on their second chances alone. They do it when they have a support structure around them and they have a path towards a more positive future.
Tell me about the Sundance.
The Sundance is as far away from the 9-to-5 cubicle life as you can get in North America today. And the Sundance is a chance where our family gets to live like our ancestors did. We get 1 week a year to live like our ancestors in a broad extended family camp with one fire at the center of it, sleeping in a teepee, and doing everything together and revolving around a spiritual axis. That's what it signifies to me. In terms of the ceremony itself, you know, you don't sleep. You sleep, 3-4 hours a night. You fast, no food, no water. You dance from before sunup. It's still dark out when you start, and you go till the evening. It's a period of intense sacrifice. And at the end of it, you probably participate in a piercing ceremony. And through all this, you deliver yourself to a state far outside your normal state of being. And I'll leave it to the, people smarter than myself to describe what that is. But for me, it's basically where I feel like myself. All the other barriers of ego and status and identity dissolve, and there's an awareness that you are connected with everything around you, with your fellow family and people. And basically, I get to feel like that for a few minutes every year, and the rest of my year is spent trying to get back to that. So it's a pretty intense part of our lives.
How do you look on your career as hip-hop and rap? Was that a significant piece in your artistic development?
Political development, like, taught me how to write, you know, to a certain extent, and that's a skill I use every day. So it was an amazing time in my life when you're in your early 20s and you get to travel to, you know, northern Canada, the territories, Yukon. You get to go down south to Arizona, Texas. But in our time, it was a magic trick that we would travel that far and people would know the lyrics to our music, because social media was new at the time, right? And I won't date myself by saying which platform was MySpace was predominant at the time. But it was a really fun time of life, and I got to meet so many cool people and see parts of the world, like Red Rock Desert, that I would have not otherwise seen. And yeah, it was a very good formative experience.
And then your career as a journalist.
Yeah. The journalism that I had the opportunity and the great privilege to do in Canada was part of the historic period that opened up this conversation of reconciliation. There was the apology from Prime Minister Harper. There was the launch of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And then there was the national events of the TRC, where survivors came forward and shared their experiences and really called on Canada to embrace a positive path forward to reckon with this period. And then I also had the opportunity to work overseas and to work across the United States and to have my thinking that had been formed in the conversation of reconciliation and forged within this conversation of what does it mean to be an Indigenous person in Canada today, and then to be transported into Yemen on the verge of a civil war, or Turkey during a period of riots, or to be in the United States during the political upheaval that we've seen over the past years, and then to ask yourself the question, well, if you're sorting out these questions of identity within the context of being an Indigenous person in Canada, what does it mean when you're no longer Indigenous to the place where you are? Mm-hmm. When you're no longer Indigenous to the place where you're working? And
also, what does it mean, to be Indigenous in such a globalized and interconnected world?
And that was really important for me, because working in the United States in particular, there is no Indigenous program. Like there, you succeed based on what you're bringing to the table. And, there's that always push and pull of meritocracy versus equity and stuff that we engage in. But to be in the States and to work with a very pluralistic, multicultural, global workforce there that I was a part of was a hugely beneficial opportunity for me, because it just, it gave me a much more humanistic global perspective. The fact that I could be with somebody on their deathbed in the Middle East and to see that their child thought of that passing the same exact way that I did sitting by my father's bedside. To be in the southern US on the Mexican border and to see the parents fighting for their kids the same way that I fight for my kids in Winnipeg at the hockey rink. It just really broadened my perspective so much. So, I cannot thank the world enough for all the opportunity that I've been given over the years to just have these experiences that have brought me to a place where I always try to understand things in a consensus view, or a view of unity.
Why did you go into politics then? I mean, you had a good career.
Look at how lucky I've been. Look at how lucky I've been. And I
but
feel
a lot of people would look and go, this is tough.
You know what I mean? I feel the need to pay it back. Like, I've been given so much in my life, not least of all was a chance to have a second opportunity. And I feel like, there was a period in 2015, 2016 where I felt like I always have something to say. Might as well put my money where my mouth is, kind of thing. But on a more serious level, I just felt like, I've been given a lot in my life, and I think I have the opportunity to make a positive contribution. And if I can help, then I probably should. We're not going to solve problems that were created 150 years in the past within a 4-year mandate. But I do believe we can make good progress and we can move things forward. And most of all, hopefully we can just bring some hope and inspiration to young people in the province. And I mean that across all communities. I definitely see that we can inspire young Indigenous kids to achieve whatever it is that they want to do. Please don't do politics, go do arts and sports and business and academics. But I think the average non-Indigenous child in Manitoba is made better by growing up in a province where they're like, yep, Indigenous person is premier, yep, that's totally normal, and that's the way the world is, and I'm doing my part to do the most that I can in a world that's inclusive and equitable.
Well, you had a specific message, when you were, made premier to young people.
Yeah.
And to say, you can change your lives, but you have to do it.
That's right.
It was a really clear message. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, what I said was, I can't decide to do that for you, and I can't take the first step, if you will. But if you decide to take the first step, then our government will make sure that you have the support that you need, education or a path to healing or economic opportunity, whatever that thing that you need is once you take that first step. Better healthcare as another example. And what was very meaningful to me is that after the election, one of the first places I went to was Pimichigamak Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. It's a massive reserve in the north. You see the housing and you see the other issues that I'm sure so many Canadians think about when they think of First Nations. And what was very moving for me is that a group of teachers from the community, First Nations women who were born and raised in Pimichigamak and are there day in, day out, trying to push for better in their community by working at the local schools, which are hugely overcrowded, by the way. They had taken the words from that election night speech and printed it onto posters, and they were getting me to sign it because they said that is the message that they wanted to share with their students. And so sometimes we get caught up in, left and right and what's the right choice. And I think the most common thing that I've heard from Canadians from all walks of life, including from Indigenous people, is that there's an element of truth in both the statements that you can't coddle people all the time, but you can't abandon people and expect them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps either. That once people have decided to make a positive change, they need support, including the support of the state.
You've made yourself, in addition to being Premier, Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, but you're also Minister of Reconciliation. We've touched on reconciliation, but what does it mean to you in terms of how it will work or how you would see it going forward or where we are in this journey?
Well, I think reconciliation involves decision making, and it involves if not sacrifice, then perhaps a necessary flexibility. And there's a lot of wisdom in the old saying of Sitting Bull, Tatanka Iatanke, who said, it's not necessary for eagles to be crows. If we want to live together, right? We don't have to all be the same. I was very lucky in my father's journey to meet the former Archbishop of Winnipeg, James Weisgerber, who's now retired now. They adopted one another as brothers in a very, I guess, family type of reconciliation, if you will. But when this man in the black robe came to our Sundance ceremony, he said a prayer that always stuck with me, and this is not verbatim, but it's close to it. He said a prayer to the Creator, thanking the Creator for the chance for us to enjoy each other's differences. And the idea of enjoy, rather than like diversity is our strength or whatever the slogan is of the day, but the fact that we enjoy, that there's something positive, that there's something unique and exhilarating about the fact that we're not all the same, I think is one of those necessary insights that you have to have, not only to advance reconciliation, but just to believe in this project of multiculturalism.
Tell me about your commitment to being a good father, because you say that is really an act of sort of defiance of colonialism and a lot of your history.
Yeah, no, that's a nice way to put it. I think first and foremost, it means like when the kids are climbing off the walls in Starbucks or in the shopping cart at Safeway, it means taking a deep breath and being patient. But on the more significant level, it's about viewing yourself within an historic context and recognizing, again, there's nothing in particular about me. I've just been super, super lucky at being able to hear these different perspectives. And one day when I was in Yemen, we were in this conversation about tradition versus modernity and what kind of life do you want to leave. And our fixer, the guy who was translating and showing us around Yemen as a documentary film crew, he was chewing on a piece of cot and he was just like looking at me and he's just like, yeah, no, you can't always live by tradition because then you'll be living someone else's life. And it was like this hugely profound statement. And I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so it's the same thing in terms of, do you want to raise your kids the way that you were raised? And regardless, and you don't have to be part of a chain of intergenerational trauma to believe, maybe I didn't agree with everything my parents did and maybe I want to do things a little bit better. I think that's a pretty universal belief. And so it's just, do you find the time on a consistent enough basis to say, here are some things that are important to me as a parent. Here are the virtues of kindness or flexibility or compassion or, just giving my kid a hug when they're having a hard time that I want to embody as a parent. And so for me, that is job one. And if I can do the job of premier well, I will be very, very proud. But if I can do the job of premier well while being a good dad, then I will know that I have succeeded.
Tell me about your connection to the land and the water, Lake of the Woods, your traditional territories.
I just love it so much. Like in particular, there's something that happens when you get out onto a metal boat and you take off from a dock and the islands and the shore kind of part and you see the open water ahead of you. It's like your spirit starts to soar. And it's just a very important part of my life for my kids to be able to experience that as well. And so sometimes we go out and we go target shooting or we go hunting. Sometimes we just go out and walk in the bush and show them like, this plant or this mineral or this thing is important to us. And there's just a really, really important part of our life. And I think there's a part of your humanity that comes alive when you're in nature. And so I always try to make time for that.
The title of your book is The Reason You Walk, which is an Anishinaabe traveling song.
Traveling song, yeah.
Can you describe the 4 elements to that? What are the reasons you walk? Can you remember that, or do you want me to?
So this is a song that we sing at the end of every gathering. Like, we come from a very traditional area. Not only is it the Creator speaking to you, but as you go through life and through your journey, different levels of meaning will clarify as to what the reason you walk is. And so early on in life, it's like you're drawing with crayons this image of what the Creator is. And it's, the Creator made you, so therefore you walk. And then you go a little bit forward into life and it's like, well, not only that, but the Creator is what animates you, right? And so the Creator's the reason you walk in terms of righteousness and goodness in life. And then you go forward perhaps even more, and it's the conception of love and what the Creator is, that is the reason you walk. And then at the end of your days, as an elder, hopefully, you understand that the Creator is the reason you walk, as in it is that destination that you're walking home towards at the end of your days. And so, I was very, very lucky to be able to witness my father's journey, his walk through life, and very lucky to grow up with the Treaty 3 knowledge keepers like that. And I just think that thinking of things in terms of the reason you walk or the reason we walk is a nice way to find some grounding principles in your journey.
We always finish these conversations asking, what does being Canadian mean to you?
As an Indigenous person today, there's always a pressure to account for the terrible impacts of the past. And I would just say that for me, being Canadian means never forgetting, but also being free from being defined by that. And to say that I fully embrace being part of this country, and that I love this country, and I love the fact that my kids and I have so much opportunity. And so I am a patriot, and I love Canada, and being a Canadian means embracing that in all its ups and downs during the tough times as well as the more proud moments. And it just means believing in something positive and big that we could do together in this country.
Well, I wish you so much luck, so many good wishes. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Canada Files.
The preceding program was made possible through the generous support of the Linwood Family Foundation, as well as the following donors: Ted and Alice Kernahan, Tony and Sherry Fell, Mary Davey, the Browning Watt Foundation, David and Cheryl Carr, Bryce and Nikki Douglas, Richard Wernham and Julia West, Earl and Janice Oborn, Michael McCain and family, Steve and Catherine Coxford, Richard Pilosoff, Clinch House Foundation, the 63 Foundation, and by the Central Canadian Public Television Association,